Welcome to my ILP project, the History of Animation. First off, I really enjoyed this course. It was exactly what I was looking for. Something just getting back in like the flow and like the habit of just like teaching and at like a post-secondary place like that. So yeah, thank you for that. I really enjoyed it, and I'm kind of sad that it's like ending tonight. Anyway, yeah, history of animation. One of the things that you wanted us to discuss in the wrap up that I feel both like your course and what I try to do with like this website was just like differentiated learning. I think in the best case scenario is what you're trying to do with like this course, using the software, using creative software, editing, be it animation or even just like design or like stuff like that, using that to teach and like learn. I thought this just the idea of doing a website was a really great idea for the project, and I really like that to kind of bring that to like my lesson as well, kind of like immerse yourself in the tools of animation and also just editing and just all the new digital creative arts, as it's called. So yeah, I'm probably gonna break this into just video clips and then see if I can splice it together. It's recording my screen at like the full resolution of like 4K, so I might have to like just squeeze it down anyway. But anyway, yeah, I'll just start from there. This is my homepage, History of Animation. The zoetrope that you see spinning in the top here, that becomes kind of like what binds the technology like lesson together. So I looked all over to get like footage. I wanted to see both what it looks like when you're looking through the screen, but also like what's happening in like the disc, kind of breaking the illusion, so you can see like the technology that's happening. Um, yeah, I just listened to my first video clip, and I think I said like 50 times. It's funny that I think that kind of gets to the lesson as well, how it's digital tools can just be a mirror like that. I feel like I'm already talking just more like a human and confidently about this lesson. Anyway, so yeah, welcome. I'm kind of framing it as a grade 9 lesson module, something I would have on like the screen, but also just like I'm putting in places where I'm stopping. Like I have ideas for prompts that I want to like get the students to talk about, and I try to work that into like the website a bit more. Even like actually, yeah, really inspired by I think some of your lessons where just you kind of the gamification of like learning. Like so I'll skip ahead to like technology where you literally I'll ask like class to like literally take a quiz on like what they think will happen before like scrolling down. So yeah, I tried to build that into the lesson and also just the overall website. So yeah, grade 9 lesson module. Welcome to the history of animation. Humans have always tried to capture movement, emotion, and story, even long before like 20th century, going back to like prehistory. And yeah, this lesson introduces students to the long creative path from prehistoric art to the first animation studios. So yeah, I thought that was a good introduction. First sub-lesson, prehistory, the going back even to Stone Age to see the influences on what became the technology of animation. I had just seen a YouTube documentary on this cave fresco, as it were, a couple weeks ago, and I'm really happy I got to incorporate it into this lesson. Um, this is not Lascaux, the famous ones. This is actually Altamira, which is closer to like Spain-Portugal border, and it shows not only hunting but the first recorded war in history. People lining up and going to battle, and you see that later on in this. And the arcs of motion are amazing for like ancient prehistory. This is something that I'm teaching to like in when I was teaching at like animation schools and like colleges, like put arcs of motion to show like the movement and what's happening in like the spine and like the overall form. And you see that in this. You see this going back to like prehistory. Like this is the beginning of the foundation that becomes like what becomes animation. Even things like motion blur, which I saw in the documentary, how it's clear they knew how to count that like animals had, you know, four legs, especially like the grazing ones. But it is clearly like a kind of motion blur to show like just this, one of these could probably be an arrow, but like the top two, that's definitely them going for motion blur. The the film effect you would see when like you have like an animal or anything fast running, like everything blurs together, and just the way the archer jumps backward and is contrasting the bow. I think that's really nice. This I found out about. I think this is a fairly recent discovery because this did not come up in any of my like art history classes, and I would have remembered this because this is so cool. 3000 BC. Oh, I'm not sure if this is a thing anymore. BCE was like the politically correct way to say like AC and BC. I'm not even sure if it exists anymore. Anyway, uh, it's a pottery that shows an animation loop. A goat jumping to bite an apple off a tree. 3,000, yeah, 5,000, no, 5,000 years ago, and it's the earliest example of animation loop. Really interesting. This too, an ancient Egyptian tune, but I teach this in like animation like schools, like the clear focus on silhouette, and already this is getting into like 20th century things where it's both artistic, but it's also like clear, instructive. It's scientifically breaking down these poses so it could actually be taught. Like these are the same as like a poster you would see in like a boxing or like an MMA class. It's yeah, this is pure. This is what I did in like first year like at Sheridan, breaking things down into like very detailed silhouetted things with a indie ink brush. Oh, the Borghese dancers. This I saw in person years ago. It's beautiful, as are all like the Roman like friezes, and it is. It could be keyframes on a film strip. Even how like the S curves of like the drapery going back and forth. You feel the motion in this marble relief sculpture. Bayeux Tapestry. I thought people made a big deal about this when I was in university, but now I get it. Like this is the beginning, the genesis of like graphic design, comic books in all of like Western, so all Western like Europe. Like you can see even now, like stylized figures and like the muted like palette and just going for clarity. Like this is graphic design, um, 1,000 years ago in like medieval ages. Oh, this is a easy way to kind of bring in. Was also talked about in like the wrap up, like involving like every diversity in children from every background. Isometric prints, going back also about 1,000 years, and just the use of isometric perspective and just the clear, crisp lines to really like reinforce that. Just so beautiful. And like as I say, like you're seeing this even in like anime and like modern digital pixel art. I took printmaking in university and just it's would have been so hard to get like this subtle, soft shadowing around here, but it's so effective. Yeah. Oh, another perfect example. I was taught even 20 years ago that like the next stage would be the magic lantern in like the 15th century. This was going to begin in like the technology phase of like the next project. But honestly, for the Chinese and Asian students, you could say this is the beginning of Magic Lantern. The Magic Lantern shows, which will make more sense in a few minutes. But yeah, it's a lantern, it's puppetry, it's animation being in performance art, and they would say this happened in like Europe in the 15th century, but no, Chinese shadow puppetry is the Magic Lantern, but it was happening at like in the first century. Which brings us into technology. This was the I think the favorite segment to make. Really ties the unit together, quite literally. Oh, you can hear my radio voice. That was actually really fun. Being able to just kind of like pretend I was doing like a TV document, like a History Channel documentary, and just doing the audio for it. A lot more polished than this. This I'm trying to go for more like an actual lesson, just pressing record and explaining what I can explain. So yeah, here we kind of are bridging the prehistory with what becomes the early actual animation studios that we would consider in the 20th century and the specific things that led to it. Oh, this is what I was talking about before. Magic Lantern, yeah, it was basically Chinese shadow puppetry, but this is when Westerners invented it. And I agree. Like, just personally and just from like an education background, it's something that needs to be focused on more. That like technology doesn't begin and end with like the West. And I feel that's a really just good and also just accurate way to put it in. China was doing the Magic Lantern in like 100 like 80. Also, zoetrope form and kind of function here. It is bridging. I feel that the zoetrope is the kind of the moment of illumination that binds the two things together. We have a magic lantern, which is quite literally just storytelling with a projector, as the kids would and students would like refer to today. Like it's a lesson with a projector. You put in a slide every like 1 minute to 2 minutes. Zoetrope, where we get like actual what we would call animation or persistence of vision animation. I like that as a technical term. It really separates it from what specifically is happening, and also how it's limited to you have the big moment of what like 24 frames per second that becomes just like the go forward until like even now happening, but it's very limited. It's quite literally this kind of doohickey thing that you have to like look through. And yeah, I used the audio if you want to listen to it again, just kind of go into more specifically how the zoetrope worked. And then that bridges to the first theater oblique and the Franciscope, which is basically just the zoetrope and the magic lantern combined. And you have the first projected animations. And I was able to actually find like a clip of it. It never works on my screen, but you can open the link. Maybe it works on yours if you're using like a Mac or something. Very cool stuff. Yeah, how it's basically just the zoetrope is a flip book converted into this optical thing, but it's limited to where you have to like look through the eye like slot. Oh, I mentioned this in the beginning. This would be like a good example of if I was teaching this in like a classroom, like this is a good place to like stop and do a prompt. A little interesting side story, which is probably apocryphal, but it it's been recorded in every like Maybridge book like I have, so I think there might be some truth to it. Maybridge, who made this, these studies of humans and animals and locomotion, legend has it Edward was inspired by a bet he heard in like a pub house. Does a horse take all four hooves off the ground at the same time during a gallop? And have the class try to like do the original, try to guess it before. And because I remember this prompt from like animation school like many years ago, and the class was divided. If and as you can see, yeah, for 2 out of the 16 frames, it is just fully off the ground, just flying through the air. Amazing stuff. Oh, which brings us to like the first actual animation studio technology. So I decided to just kind of break down um, the archetypal animation desk and the three bits of technology that make it. It's basically just a flip book that's attached to your desk, so it allows you to make a flip book. A light block. This is something that people don't really may not seem like obvious to people, but so much of especially classical like hand drawn animation is tracing the last frame and quite literally getting complex poses in between together, and it's just yeah, it's a light box and a peg bar, which the students can relate to. That it's just like a three-hole punch, but it leads into, which I talk about next unit, just the standardization that leads to the mass production and assembly line expansion that is like Disney. They take an early kind of like curiosity, but Disney actually like turns it into like an assembly line the same way that like General Motors like takes cars into like it becomes like an international like mega industry by industrializing it. Oh, I talked about this in the next lesson, so I wanted to go back and put it in. But this is one of the um, big jumps that like one of the few actually technology that Disney developed themselves. They just kind of like perfect from like other studios, the multi-plane camera. And this is basically an analog version of After Effects or like iMovie or editing software, but it's analog. You're moving different planes, different layers of Photoshop or After Effects, as it were, with literal like wheelie joints, and then you could create in animation like cinematic pan shots. And I would go in if this was a lesson and like kind of talk about that with the class more. Parallax, which is famous in like retro games like Silk Song, where the foreground moves fast but the background pans slower, and you get that 3D effect like you're actually like driving by in a car, and being able to just like pan and zoom like a cinematic camera can do. But it's really difficult to be doing hand drawn. We're just like scaling up where you're also with each drawing when you're also trying to think about like animation, like posing and stuff like that. So yeah, really cool stuff. I could spend probably a month just talking about like the bridge technology and just really cool stuff. Early studios, the beginning of what we would call 20th century animation. This section was a lot of fun. Also, this is just the bare bones. Uh, each studio, I could easily make lessons out of like a week's worth because they're very like interesting. This, Winsor McCay and Gertie the Dinosaur, really ties well back to the beginning in technology unit. It links with the performance art aspect that you see in the Magic Lantern and the Chinese shadow puppets, where quite literally, Gertie the Dinosaur was not meant to be seen alone. It wouldn't work alone. It was the Winsor McCay interacting with like the screen, and I'll be sure see if you, I should have included actually a link to like the web link. It's pretty short, but yeah, it is performance art blended with like animation. Like the human actor like interacts with like Gertie the dinosaur seemingly like in real time. Very inventive actually for the time. Seems more like a kind of like postmodern NFB like Canada animation versus the first like animation. And quite literally, yeah, Gertie's also the first one that isn't just kind of like very abstract, like the Magic Lantern and like and oblique shows. You actually had like a character. Oh, this is actually, yeah, this ties into like a lesson I had in Sheridan Animation School where there's a big moment in early Disney cartoons where the dog, not Goofy, but yeah, Pluto, Goofy's dog Pluto, he Goofy does something stupid and Pluto literally looks at the camera and like shrugs and rolls his eyes. And I think oh yeah, this is in my like like the 12 like Angry Men animation book about like the 12 guys that really invented like modern animation techniques. This is when they believe animation really started, when characters like felt like they had an inner life. Quite literally, they were characters, not just something mechanical happening in the background. Uh, Fritz the Cat, very important because this is happening like decades before, like even Steamboat Willie. Not about yeah, almost no, almost 20 years. You're seeing the Fleischer brothers really just do the first what we could consider like an animation studio, like Warner Brothers, like Disney. They have their core characters. They have a franchise for each, and they also bring in like they start like yeah, basically franchising popular comic book characters like Popeye, as well as creating like Fritz the Cat, Betty Boop, and Coco the Clown. I go more into, but this is the rubber hose animation where quite literally, there's less anatomically correct movement, but every leg and an arm are they look like rubber hoses, and that's kind of exaggerated with like moving S curves. Okay, yeah, and very famously Steamboat Willie, which just be about 100 years. It just was released from copyright this year, so anyone can make a Steamboat Willie cartoon. I thought that was mind blowing. There are already a bunch of like horror games on Steam using like this character design exactly. Oh, this is where the multi-beam camera comes in. Disney are the first to do really feature-length films, and also it brings us to like just they bring in highly structured animation pipeline. They bring animation into mass production. Yeah, and here we see Disney in the 30s looks more kind of like the assembly line of like a car factory versus say like an artist studio, which amazing stuff. Oh, I really wanted to include this because coming from like a background like visual effects, I feel like this gets overlooked, but stop motion is a huge part of not just visual effects for film, but like filmmaking in general, where I also saw an amazing documentary about Harryhausen a month ago, and it's true. He was involved. He was basically co-director of like every film he was involved in because he had to be just involved in so much of the technical as well, from like color balance and like just the setup of like the scene to like plan for when he would add his like stop motion skeletons. And you can see that even to this day. The best movies, the best visual effects, like the Jurassic Park and the Star Wars, where their visual effects hold up, is when they were a huge central part of pre-production. Like they were thinking about every shot, how they're going to make it, and how they're going to get this visual effect. That's why Empire Strikes Back still holds up. That's why Jurassic Park visual effects holds up, because basically visual effects were co-directors. They had to be involved in every aspect to just really create that illusion of like life and realism. And even now, like with the all the technology, whenever that's the famous thing, like saying we'll fix it in post. Then even if it's like really flashy, like 3D animation, or like it becomes dated and looks bad almost immediately. Think of say like I don't know, like the early Marvel films where already the animation starting to look dated, like Black Panther or like the Marvels. Oh, and ending with the first studios to go into Technicolor, which again is both Fleischer and Disney. I was old enough that I still saw these sometimes on like film strips, but like the original Max Fleischer Superman cartoons are amazing. They're beautiful. Every shot looks painted, and it's happening before Fantasia. Even though Fantasia, the Disney movie from like what is it, 40s, gets a lot of the credit for it. It really you see that happening first with Max Fleischer Studios once again. Summative assessment and the assignment. Uh, this is one of those things I think just highlights how much I took from your course. So many things I didn't think of until actually seeing like lessons happening and like me doing like lessons myself to understand the things to clarify that you might not feel you have to clarify for students, such as each student. I remember, you gave me this specific feedback. Make sure each student is assigned a specific part of history or given the chance to choose for it, because it's so true. Even in like your lessons, like if you give a like okay, perfect example, like your elements and principles of design, everyone's going to choose color if they have the option, and then you'll just have like 20 students like basically copy and pasting the color wheel and talking about that, just because it's so much easier to say get things about color theory. It's color theory's everywhere. and versus say something on like line. Like I really enjoyed that. I think I chose that like assignment last, and I had to kind of like really bust out some of my old like Sheridan animation like college books to just get just the cool things you can do with like line and like shadow that you might not think about. So that was an amazing feedback to just, and I even have it here. Yeah, that just things to think about like that, like making sure that like just make or like specifically like make don't just do like one sentence on like one of the timelines. And also similar to like the zone course, I really like the idea that once you do when you do assignments like this, then you can quite literally like make you can have like an output like this. You can have everyone contribute to like be it a Canva or like a Google site. Every student gets like a piece of the puzzle that lets them eventually make something like this. And that's also a big thing from like different instruction that I wanted to put in. I really like that in your course, like video or motion graphics, digital illustration, like stuff like Photoshop, that could you the choice of like medium. Like every student's gonna have their better at. Like some people might just want to do like a radio broadcast about like the history of animation, but like more people like me that are tend to be more visual. Like I loved the fact that I could just do like a oh I had a what is it the visual encyclopedia growing up when I got out when I was 5 and it was my favorite presents. Just basically like very early like graphics, like a very graphic heavy encyclopedia, and I really liked doing that just for this assignment. Like just finding pictures of like the most important parts of like history and like doing little snippets on it. Like that was great. So yeah, I really wanted to build into like my own like assessment, like giving students just uh, different kinds of different options for how they wanted to like do the task. I really like that using different kinds of like visual learning and like to figure out how they wanted to like both teach and learn. This is my rubric for summative assessment. It pretty much speaks for itself. Pretty standard based on like the curriculum. What I thought I would talk about just briefly for this section is how. Oh, also like a great I think idea from your course is using communications technology like Canva, like digital polls, like the mini games that you like sprinkle through the lesson. I think that's an excellent use of formative assessment. It's a great way to use like digital tools and gamification, be it Canva or things like that, as just I think a very something I didn't even think about like going into this course. It's a very engaging way to make use of like all like the cool things of like online and like digital technology and the games and like Canva, like mind map projects that you were doing. That really, I think, is a great just strength of like Comtech in itself. Kind of being able to engage with just not just like formative assessment that just really connects with like the next generation of students. Like I enjoyed like the Canva quizzes. I look forward to like there being like a Canva quiz on like each lesson. So yeah, that was amazing, excellent stuff. To wrap up, we have the career section. Um, I even though this wasn't like told to do, I wanted to see if I could. I used to do like web design years ago, and I wanted to see if I could get the buttons working, and I was very impressed I could do this. Um, this is great. I thought a good idea. Not only just kind of like break down the specifics of like what are the 5 kind of like core jobs in 3D animation, um, but also just in like a kind of like a holistic learning sort of idea that there's basically for every learning type, and this goes into differentiated instruction as well. for every learning type, for every like archetypal way of learning that a student might have, there is an animation, a 3D animation position for them. Not necessarily that I would recommend 3D animation for like every student, but for every kind of like talent and like mindset, like there is something you'd be better and like would just, even if you're like say doing like a write up for like a grade 9, 10 class, like there are things that like different personalities of students will like really attach to. Character animation, it gets a lot of like the fame. Um, Even when I started out, like everything seemed to be called character animator, even if you were actually doing like rigging or like modeling. But yeah, this is like the performance one. Um, Speaking of like new technologies, you don't even have to animate anymore. You can do motion capture if, say, you're just like someone who's really into like theater or like dance or something like that. But yeah, it's one of the more creative ones, and it used to be strong drawing skills, but not so much anymore with all that we have with motion capture. Rigging, um, if you are really into more like STEM and like very technical stuff, like you're more on like just the pure programming side, you should consider like rigging because they it's one of the few animation jobs that they're always looking for people into, and but it it's the most like 9 to 5 you're going to be doing more programming than anything like creative, and that's something to consider as well. Um, Modeling, a lot of people come from like AutoCAD and like literal industrial design background that thrive in like modeling, and there's a real art form to it. Like you can see it here with like just having like quad loops, as it's calling, being able to break down complicated things into just symmetry and patterns, and how important that is. And yeah, if you like sculpture, if you like working with your hands and like modeling, you can really connect with. Uh, Texture artist. It's This is kind of like you have to be half a programmer, like a rigging artist, but it's also helps if you have like a painterly side if you're into like texture and design and just have an appreciation for it. But it is mostly like renders and stuff like that. And like, yeah, lighting artists. I came from an oil painting background, and there was a lot of overlap with this. I mean, I put this in even though it's not like 3D, but this is what your job would be. They give you a painting from a concept artist, and you have to recreate that look using like lighting design. And if you like to paint, if you like prefer color, lighting artist is like what really suits you. And this is fairly new to the game. I even did the particle sims because it was just they would look for any like 3D animator with more of a programming background. But I this is becoming more and more like an archetypal animation job in itself, especially with the rise of like Unreal and like game engines and also just the more video games. Like if you come from like just kind of like a more math and like physics background, you will probably love being a 3D simulation artist. So yeah, I just tried to kind of like break that down in each of these sections. And yeah, so that's the course. Once again, thank you so much for being an amazing instructor. I feel I really took a lot from the course, and yeah, I'm a little sad to see it go now. So yeah, thanks again, and yeah, have a very Merry Christmas.